Hey class, here's your notes. We're going to do some notes on controlled experiment terms. So first, the experimental group. These guys are the group in the experiment that is testing the problem. So a group could be, for example, you want to find out if other liquids other than water make plants grow. So your independent variable, also your experimental group, would be different types of liquids. Well, start thinking to yourself, what kind of liquids might you want to test? Well, you could test beer, you could test pop, you could test Gatorade, you can test tons of things. So that's the group you want to test. In this situation, also known as the independent variable, is aspirin. So let's say you want to know a certain type of aspirin. Does aspirin work better than acetaminophen, which is also known as Tylenol, right? So you would have one versus the other, and you might want to use a sugar pill for a control in regards to that. So your control group, speaking of control group in the experiment that is used to compare to the experimental group, also known as the independent variable. Remember, the independent variable is controlled by the experimenter. So experimental group, independent variable, experimental group. Okay, so hopefully that helps you. Moving on. Here we go. Whoop. All right. So the sugar pill could be the control group. So you could have what's called a double-blind study. Both groups don't know what they're getting. They just think they're getting maybe an aspirin. Both think they're getting an aspirin, but the sugar pill is not an aspirin. So down below, here we go. Moving on up. Constant. Parts of the experiment that are the same for both the control group and the experimental group. So you don't want any other variable to be different than the you don't want one more dosage to be too much for another thing. You don't want to have more sugar pill. You don't want to have more aspirin in regards to the dosage, because if you do, then it could have been the dosage that causes the difference. You got to lessen the variables. So you got to keep things the same. Probably the time of day you take it. Do you take it on an empty stomach or a full stomach? These are all things that need to be the same for the control group and the experimental group, also known as the independent variable. If you have things the same, you have control over the outcome. All right, and that's what you want. You want control over the outcome, and that's called a controlled experiment. So again, dosage 3 milligrams, time 2 times a day. Might be also on a full stomach or an empty stomach. Very important. Okay, next. The independent variable we already discussed is also known as the experimental group. So it's the group in the experiment that is testing the problem, figuring things out. The question you might have, the problem statement. Does aspirin take away a headache? Boom. Then you test it. Use a control, sugar pill. Again, don't forget the experimental group and independent variable are the same. Now the dependent variable, so these are your two variables. The dependent variable is dependent upon the independent variable. So if the aspirin works, the headache should go away. That would be the measurable result. So your measurable result of the experiment influenced / caused by the independent variable / experimental group. So again, the headache is gone. No more pain. Got it? Moving on. We're doing great here. About to bring it home. There's not much left here. While doing an experiment, follow directions to reach proper conclusions. When doing an experiment, you need a control group, so a comparison can be made. All factors of an experiment should be the same except for the variables. Remember, there can always be more than one factor that can influence a variable. This is why we use constants to narrow down the cause, which I mentioned already. When doing an experiment, take accurate records. End of story. We are done. All right. Okay. That should be a wrap. I'm trying to stop this thing. Of course, it's got a mind of its own.